Foreign Affairs of Italy. Giovanni, thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Now we have the technical deepening after the high-level segment, and I begin just with a few messages and then give the floor to our distinguished panelists. We all agree on the fact that the phenomenon of corruption affects all countries around the world, albeit to varying degrees. Article 61 of ANCAC points to the need for a reconstruction of reality. Therefore, the issue of measuring corruption plays a central role in the prevention and fight against corruption. For too long, the measurement has focused on an approach based primarily on the perception of corruption. But perceptive indicators have contributed to nurture a name and shame scenario, not advancing and developing the comprehension and the reconstruction of corruption. The better you know a problem, more effective is the solution. The most of you probably know the so-called Trocadero paradox, in light of which the more you fight against corruption, the higher becomes its perception. I repeat, the more you fight against corruption, the higher becomes its perception. To make a long story short, in these last 7 years, we tried to slatentize the fallacy of the perceptive indicators and their negative macroeconomic consequences. Unfortunately, the so-called initiative, the Trocadero paradox, has still reached only partial results. On one hand, and this is the good news, we all agree nowadays on the need for a new measurement tools or tool basket based on usable, identifiable, reliable, and valid data to measure corruption. We are not alone, because now it is on the global agenda, in G7, G20, UN, OECD, and also IACA agenda. But unfortunately, on the other hand, the ranking and rating approach versus deep understanding and getting better tools still exists and still resists. That's why this side event and the initiative of measuring corruption are crucial in advancing. I am very, very happy for the title we have today for this technical segment, to trigger action and to assess impact. So I have the honor to chair and moderate this technical segment, and we have 5 panelists here and 3 by remote. So please, you have 4 minutes each one. And I begin from the moderator of the previous panel, Angela May. Angela is a leader of research in the United Nations framework in this sector, and she goes to present us the statistical framework to measure corruption developed by UNODC. Please, Angela.
Thank you, Giovanni. And well, you have heard a lot about this UNODC statistical framework. So let me now explain what it is. Next one. So first of all, I wanted to say we don't start from nothing. I mean, we have been over the years measuring corruption at international level in the context of SDG 16, as been mentioned earlier. So there are 2 indicators in the SDG framework that relate to bribery among citizens and bribery among public sector. So as UNODC, we are the custodian of the indicator on bribery among the public. And here you see just illustratively the example of what we could do with global data on bribery that illustrate, for example, here that the higher level of corruption is associated with lower level of income, for example. The World Bank is the custodian of the other indicator that is bribery within the private sector. So globally, we already have something, where we could measure corruption. Next one. But as has been explained earlier, the state parties to the convention, I actually asked, I said, we need more. Bribery is not sufficient. How can we measure it beyond bribery and also beyond the perception? And so that's how we started our work. And as mentioned earlier by Ms. Wally, we have done this work in consultation with you see here, 200 experts, 149 entities around the world, 81 state parties included, civil society, think tanks. We have tried to really involve as many as they wanted to participate in helping us to measure, to have this measurement framework developed. Next one. So that is what it is, the framework. And I want to spend a little bit, maybe more than a minute, to tell you exactly what it is. So one of the issues is that we do with the framework is really to crystallize the idea that we can't measure corruption with one number, because there are many aspects of corruption that are important to measure, but they say different things. And so, in a way, we talk about direct measures when we can say, what are the indicators that can tell us, do we have more or less corruption today than yesterday? Bribery is an example of the outcome indicators because clearly, having 20% of people reporting paying a bribe last year and having 25 this year clearly tell us we have not made progress, for example. But there are a lot of indirect measures, and nowadays most of the corruption is measured actually through indirect measure. But they cannot really say whether we have more or less corruption. We talk about perception, again. We talk about risk. So, for example, looking at procurement is not measuring corruption, it's measuring the risk of corruption. We talk about responses, so looking at legal framework or the criminal justice responses. How many people have been arrested, prosecuted, convicted for corruption? These are all measures that clearly talks about an element of that framework, but they don't measure corruption. And so, and all of this frame into the context of looking at issues relating to the UNCAC articles on criminalization, looking at preventive measures, but also to think about the environment to report and address corruption. So where we want to go, hopefully, would be to have direct measures. As today we measure GDP. We know that, GDP helps us tell us whether we are doing better or worse. We do educational attainment easily. These are direct measures. So we hope that over the years we will all be sitting here talking and agree and thinking about those direct measures. But these direct measures take time to develop. Take resources, national statistical system, national institution working toward those. While we work, we can also look at the other measurement of corruption that are existing today. But then the important thing and what this framework really, most of the value is really to say this. It's important that we recognize different. Sorry, I thought to be. So this is just to give you a flavor of the richness of the framework. Next one. And next one, please. And just to give you an example of how it looks like. So for every dimension that I show you by column, but also by row, there are a list of indicators. Again, that can help countries to understand, to pick, to see which one are the most relevant. The idea is that every country would pick at least one outcome, one perception, one risk, and one response. So that to make sure that the corruption is not measured only with one element, because one element alone will give a bias indication. Next one, to finish, the statistical commission is the statistical framework is not only a list of indicators, but also a metadata. So each of the indicators that we presented has been explained in the internet. And I leave you with this, hopefully that you wanted to go and access and see the corruption measurement. Thank you.
Thank you to Angela May, Director of Research of the UNODC. Really interesting and looking at this metadata and the growing information we have in front of us. Probably we have also to think about the future possible use of artificial intelligence in managing and analyzing this data, but probably it's a remote future. Now we go to national perspective, and we have a first intervention by Mr. Boris Vukasinovic, Deputy Director of the Agency for Prevention of Corruption of Montenegro, that speaks about integrity in action. Mr. Vukasinovic, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Let me first thank organizer for letting us to present, and thank you audience for coming. So ladies and gentlemen, Integrity Plan is a corruption risk assessment tool prescribed by the Law on Prevention of Corruption, which allows organizations to assess the exposure of workplaces and work processes to corruption and tackle perceived shortcomings. It is applied in public institutions in Montenegro, but it can be used in the private sector as well. All public institutions are obliged to adopt an integrity plan, conduct an assessment, and submit reports detailing its implementation. The agency role is both supervisory and advisory. From one side, the agency oversees the implementation of integrity plans and at the same time provides recommendations for its improvement. Integrity plans are being continuously implemented by most public institutions, but we were questioning their practical impact. Therefore, together with our partners from United Nations Development Programme and with the unselfish support of Republic of Korea's Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission, we created an innovative evidence-based methodology for assessing the implementation of anti-corruption measures. Composed of 33 indicators, methodology measures compliance with the Law on Prevention of Corruption, Law on Free access to information, and Law on management and internal controls in the public sector. More importantly, public institutions were equal partners in designing methodology. The unique aspects is reflected in providing proof of meeting the criteria defined by indicators, whereby organizations receive points for compliance. In addition to legal compliance, methodology measures the effectiveness of internal procedures, educational activities, transparency, and the quality of integrity plans. Our primary goal has always been and continues to be not just documenting integrity on paper, but actively putting it into action. Our aim was to challenge lethargic institutions, motivating them to go beyond basic legal compliance and embrace proactive measures. Methodology went through pilot testing within state administration and social and child welfare systems, with publicly disclosed results and rankings based on their scores and performances. Currently, we are conducting a corruption risk assessment within judicial system. Also, we have developed an IT tool for collecting and analyzing assessment data. Media involvement created a specific competition between related institutions. During 1 month of collecting the evidence, authority proactively introduced new procedures to improve their rankings, and this approach resulted in 200 new procedures, documents, and good practices. This was the initial immediate impact of methodology, showing that public institutions often require thoughtful incentive to become more active. On the other hand, for the agency, it was assigned to persist in such activities, inspiring institutions to eliminate conditions that may lead to corruption. In order to foster excellence through competition, our mission is to expand horizons by assessing all public institutions in Montenegro. Additionally, we will promote best practices and examples through educational activities directed towards integrity in action. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you, really relevant, interesting, and giving us also the possibility to consider in an holistic view the possible approach to the corruption measurement in the experience of single institutions. And we also in our system have a relevant national anti-corruption authority with competencies really similar to your agency, and we know this kind of experience. Now it's time of the first speaker online by remote, Rossio Stefani Olmos, Executive Director for the National Subsystem of Governance as crime and justice statistics from Mexico. Mexico is one of the most active countries in measuring corruption agenda, and the intervention is on use of different data sources to measure corruption in Mexico. Please, Rosio, you have the floor.
Thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here with you and share the National Statistical Office in Mexico experience and welcome and celebrate the statistical framework. First idea I want to share with you is that general measurements of corruption or indexes are in fact little useful in regard to address this problem or design public policies to reduce causes and impact of corruption. So instead of that general expressions about corruption, what our National Statistical Office, INEGI, has been doing in the last decade is to provide to society and decision makers specific information and data about how this affects individuals and economic units, and specific information about the institutional capacities of government to solve the problem. We produce specific information not only about perceptions, but experience of corruption. For instance, a population in contact with public servants. We estimate millions of transactions between citizens and their governments. Then we estimate users who believe or have heard that there is corruption in the formalities that carry out, and then users who actually experience act of corruption. We can estimate a prevalence of corruption by type of formalities or a specific service. For instance, in top of that, corruption in contact with public security authorities or transit authorities is the most frequent in Mexico. To address the main challenges, INEGI has been collecting data about perception, risk, and responses through different sources. In one hand, the measurement of the phenomenon and the characterization through national surveys, as the National Survey on Government Quality and Impact, NSIG, and a similar one about regulatory quality and government impact on business. We also have data about corruption in the security and justice process in Mexico, thanks to the National Survey on Population Deprived of Liberty, and POL, that collect experience that inmates have with police, justice, and prisons authorities. On the other hand, we have a comprehensive approach to institutional capacities of government through the National Government Census. This National Government Census has been recollecting data about institutional capacities of public administration at municipal, state, and federal level. On this national census, we collect data about anti-corruption plans or programs' existence, a mechanism to reduce and control risk of corruption, and data about public procurement. We can also collect data about institutional capacities to the security and justice process with different national census about public security, prosecution of justice, administration of justice, and penitentiary system. About 2 years ago, we created a technical committee specialized in information on corruption to work with other relevant stakeholders, including academia and civil society. On this technical committee, we can develop common definitions, standards, and methodologies, as well as information on best practices. To close my intervention, I want to address main challenges to improve statistics about corruption, as the use of anti-corruption administrative records, the strength of technical capacities and understanding of the phenomenon, and the use of non-traditional methods for data collection. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's inspiring and also interesting to see how is developing the exercise in Mexico. Now we come back in the room and in Europe with Mrs. Mariana Obradovic, head of the Unit for Monitoring and Evaluation National Strategy Documents Agency of Prevention of Corruption of Serbia. It's relevant not only to measure the corruption as a phenomenon in itself, but also to assess what's the impact of the law on corruption prevention. And this is a different modality and approach, very interesting. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to present the methodology for measuring effects of the law on prevention of corruption. In addition to its role in the execution of the law on prevention of corruption, the Agency for Prevention of Corruption is obliged to measure its effects. In compliance with its obligation to measure effects of the law on prevention of corruption, the agency devised a methodology. UNODC office in Serbia has committed to support the implementation and specifically the measurement of effects of the law. The law on prevention of corruption came into force in September 2020. In addition to the rules regarding the management of conflict of interest of public officials, the law focuses on a variety of other anti-corruption mechanisms. The methodology assumes that the effects of the law result from the agency operation. Any empirical evidence confirming the causal relationship is out of the reach. The methodology provides for measurement a set of indicators and details in values over at least 2 measurement cycles. These are the categories. Outputs are activities of the agency pursuant to the law. The methodology provides for 102 specific types of activities grouped in 16 subject areas. Internal outcomes are results of the activities of the agency. Based on the objectives of the law, the methodology provides for 72 types of results. Progress analysis compare results from at least 2 measurement cycles. External outcomes are results of the anti-corruption activities of various governmental authorities. However, this category focuses only on such anti-corruption activities that were initiated by the agency. Indicator 1 reflects direct effect of the law. It tracks the compliance of public officials and governmental authorities with the law, as well as the effects of the agency operation and such compliance. Indicator 2, 3, and 4 provide for external validation of indicators. 1, these are subjective indicators as they reflect public perception of corruption. Indicators 5 and 6 are objective external validators. Indicator 5 is the local transparency index of municipal authorities, whereas indicator 6 tracks data regarding public procurement by all government entities. Next slide, please. Checklists are events independent of application of the law that nonetheless may contribute to the changes in indicator. If any of these events should occur during a measurement cycle, the measurement report should account for these events and explain their potential impact on observed values. By design, indicator reflects desired effects of the law. Effects of the law are positive, where a positive indicator 1 value is accompanied by some positive external indicator values and no external indicator values is negative. Effects of the law are also positive, where there is no change in indicator 1 value, yet positive changes are observed in several external indicator values. Yet, when changes in 1 or more indicators do not follow anticipated trends through at least 2 measurement cycles or are trending in opposite direction, the effects of the law should be deemed negative. Observed negative effects necessitate deep dive analysis to determine if they stemmed from systematic flaw in the law or suboptimal or inadequate application of the law by the agency. Thank you.
Really interesting. Thank you. We are now in front of us not only phenomenon and measurement. We have phenomenon, enforcement, law, impact of the law on prevention, and the new modality of measurement. And we go on this line, ideally, enlarging our attention to the risk. and in particular measuring corruption risks. And we have with us by remote a representative of the OECD, and in particular Mr. Jesper Johnson, Deputy Head of Division, Public Sector Integrity Directorate for Public Governance of the OECD. The intervention is on the OECD's public integrity indicators. I have the chance to hear recently this new proposal of measuring corruption risk indicators. It was really interesting and very happy to have with us Mr. Jesper Johnson. Please, Mr. Johnson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you everyone for listening in. So indeed, in a few minutes, let me give you an overview of what these new indicators can do. So first question, again, there's been a lot of new developments. We just heard Angela talk about the new UN statistical framework, which is the milestone in this area. I think OECD countries were also aware of the measurement gap and 4 years ago set out again to contribute to better evidence in this area. So it was with the same ambition of getting more reliable evidence to inform evidence-based policymaking, not only relying on the indices we have out there, but having more tangible data, OECD-style data. Again, moving away from focusing only on rankings, but providing a dashboard that can show the strength and the weaknesses of different sets of the anti-corruption and integrity subsystems. That also speaks better to governments, that they can actually identify the steps that matter in terms of how do you improve regulations, how do you improve practices, and how do you fight corruption in a more tangible way. We're special in the way that we are the first set of indicators, of a standard set of indicators that are developed by governments for governments and are grounded in agreed normative standards, of course from the OECD, but also from the UN and the EU and other regional bodies. And we do a lot of work to take different key performance indicators from the membership and then spread those good ideas to other parts of the membership. I don't have time to go through the whole methodology, but just to emphasize a few key points. So we only use primary data directly from the source. This is a uniquely featured by the OECD. We do a lot of effort on making sure that we assess both regulations and practice, so the de facto de jure distinction that was mentioned earlier again. And our indicators are drawn from various different data sources that allows a very nice triangulation and to measure what is, of course, a very difficult concept. So this is an example of a country analysis slide that we use. It shows the areas that are covered so far: strategy, lobbying, conflict of interest, political finance, access to information. We just launched internal control, risk management, and internal audit. And this chart emphasizes the distinction between regulations and practice-oriented indicators. We also have the classic standard type of legislative checklist indicators. I picked a few examples from political finance. So how many countries have a ban on anonymous donations, a ban on donations from publicly owned enterprises, or a ban on donations from foreign enterprises and foreign states. We do a lot of, as I said, emphasis on this implementation gap between whether regulations are in place and whether they're actually implemented in practice. So this example is on conflict of interest declarations for 4 sets of actors: ministers, members of parliament, the highest members of the judiciary, and top-tier civil servants. And we can see here that both the legal standards, those are the blue dots, they vary, but more importantly, that the gap in terms of whether ministers, parliamentarians, top judges, and top-tier civil servants, whether they actually submit these interest declarations in practice, that also varies quite a lot. A more kind of frontier advanced use of data analytics is when we go and we mine the databases of parliaments to extract some data on regulatory scrutiny and stability. So whether laws are adopted in extraordinary procedure, how frequently they are amended. I think these are great indicators that can also be developed through web scraping, through a time series. Another example of this use of administrative data that really go to the source of well, the type of data that OECD wants to measure is, for example, on the recent data set we just launched on the coverage of an internal audit. Again, both in terms of the regulations, but also in terms of practice the last 5 years. So this was a very quick snapshot of some of the data, and then I will just, in the chat, provide you with some links so you can explore further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And now we come back in the room and we pass just ideally to the think tank perspective with Mr. Benjamin Smith, Program Officer of the Center for International Private Enterprise. And the intervention is on the a question why public data transparency matters today, and in particular what I am curious to hear is about this new generation of indexes, indicators. Thank you, you have the floor.
Have to click it? Yes. There it is. In the back, could you turn off the PowerPoint for just a moment? My wife is watching from Brazil and I just want her to see my face. So I'm Ben Schmidt, and I'm from the Center for International Private Enterprise. And I'm here to talk about why public transparency matters today. And before I do that, I just want to mention that CIPE develops and strengthens democracy by helping market actors like businesses and associations of businesses and CSOs engage in democratic processes and practice integrity. And that's why the State Department's INL has decided to fund our work to galvanize the private sector as partners for combating corruption. And now on the screen, if you want to turn the PowerPoint back on, you can see the corruption risk forecast. It's a new corruption measurement tool that's been developed by us at CIPE and also by our partner, Professor Alina Mangiu-Pipiti at Lewis, as Mr. Tartaglia, your country's Lewis University. Now, I've blended on this slide the homepage at the top and then the actual map itself that you can click through at corruptionrisk.org if you want to visit it right now. And what you can see is that there are more than one index on this site. There are actually 3. And to refer back to an earlier presentation by UNODC, this collection of tools here allows you to see the opportunities and constraints on corruption via the IPI, or the Index of Public Integrity, and also allows you to see a forward-looking view based on trend analysis and a gauge of political will, guessing where corruption is going to go in the future. Now these two, the IPI and the forecast, are being updated this week. So take a look later this week and you'll see the 2023 coming out. So if you could just click one time on the PowerPoint, you'll see I'm going to focus on the Transparency Index today. So looking just at the Transparency Index, it's really cool. There's 143 countries on it, and what it tracks is how well governments are meeting their transparency commitments. And where do these transparency commitments come from? Well, we're at UNCAC. UNCAC itself, the text has transparency commitments. So does SDG 16. That's where these come from. And so if you click one more time on the PowerPoint, you'll see on the left-hand side, that's what these are. These are de facto transparency data sources. And for over 143 countries, we have collected data sources for all of them. If you want to know how Nigeria's mining concessions are, go to the website, click on Nigeria, click on mining concessions, and you're at the site. So it's a huge resource for finding active public data sources. And what you see in green is when the data source is complete, yellow when it's partial, and red when it's non-existent. And if you click one more time on the PowerPoint, you'll see what's also added to this are de jure commitments. So UNCAC would be one of them. Membership of the Financial Action Task Force against money laundering would be another. Having a central beneficial ownership register or a commitment to have one is one of these de jure commitments.
that UNODC framework and some other, how to say, measurements which were introduced were like an alternative to CPI or to VGI by World Bank. So I could actually have a specific question. I didn't get specifically about UNODC if there would be like something quantitative data, which is about to be like measurement, for example, for bribery. And if it is so, would you on purpose prevent somebody from making a ranking? Because I understand that many governments, they don't like ranking and being compared, but if you have like quantitative data, some researcher can make an ranking. So do you will telco, is it like an issue for you or it's like another thing?
I think that can...
No, I think that's a very interesting question. So, first question, yes, the idea of the framework, all the framework are quantitative indicators. So the idea is to quantify it. So that's the first. And for example, bribery is one of the indicators that is clearly very quantitative. But the issue of the ranking, so the issue is that some index or indicator, call them as some measures, are designed for ranking. So, for example, the CPI, I don't know, think about the Human Development Index, etc. They're index that per se do not have a meaning. What does it mean 0.8? What does it mean 0.9? You know, it doesn't have but they are designed for ranking so that they make sense only when you put them in a scale with different countries. Of course, the other indicators are designed to, measure mostly trend or level. But as you say, clearly, everybody can do a ranking, even bribery. Somebody can rank who has the highest bribery, who has the lowest bribery. But they are not designed for that. Then how audience users you want to use the data is their prerogative to choose. That is in a way the purpose that you have from the beginning in developing the measure.
From the room.
Thank you. Andrea Hampton from the World Customs Organization. Obviously, our interest here this week is trying to figure out how this high-level policy measures can be cascaded and work in the specific environment that our members are operating in. We've done a lot through some recent program and initiatives at the WCO to support our members looking to concretely apply measurements of this sort in their own environment. To what extent are your various initiatives looking at how these national level measures can be cascaded and interpreted on the ground level, because that's actually where the corruption is happening?
Who wants to take the floor? Please.
Yeah, okay. For example, World Customs Organization, you see, the customs authorities are the enabler of public sector corruption in the sense that briberies take place, in the importation of goods, and it's linked to organized crime. So one of the ways we could do it is when you strengthen the institutions by all the indicators that have been said since afternoon, all the indicators of those institutions, I feel is another way where at that level that it will reduce the corruption at the customs level. Because where officers are being penalized, they are being prosecuted, most of them, they are going to jail, and you are checking their access to their information about their income and all those things. So this is what I think at the ground level, we can improve it as an indicator. Thank you.
If I may also comment on this, I think what you are underlining is the importance of the granularity of the data. Yes. So that is not national, but that identify also the different institutions. Yes.
Please.
I think the other issue as well is just whether these indices just stay at the high-level conversations but never actually impact people on the ground. And I think that's why I tried to use the example of ABOC in Ghana, where if public data sources exist, they can be used to press accountability. And that's why I think it's so important to track whether public sources of data exist. and whether they don't, and whether they're partial, whether they're complete. One of my other projects is a State Department funded project called Hack Corruption. We go around the world and we bring together regional groups of tech savvy young people, and we do hackathons. But the goal of the hackathon is not to break a computer system or a network, but actually to build a system that will fight corruption. And what we experienced in Colombia, in Latin America region, in Nepal for the Asia region, is on the ground there are corruption problems. And what you need first is to get data that is relevant to those on the ground issues. And when public sources of information exist, or when Freedom of Information Acts exist, and local governments, when requested, can provide that information, you can suddenly use that to press for accountability. And so one of the projects that worked very well in Nepal is actually Own Your School. And it was about getting information about local education system, local school budgets, and pressing for change. Because what the Nepalese civil society organizations was seeing was that when you broke down an education budget for a single school, half of the budget was going to the security guards and to the food and to the administration, and only a small percentage, something like 25%, was actually going to the teachers. And it was backwards for the people who were living in those communities. This doesn't make any sense that we're spending all this money, but only 25% of it is actually going to the teaching, which is the reason why we have this school. And so having public and local sources of data available, I think, are really important. And so that's what the Transparency Index is trying to do, but obviously we could become more granular about it so that people on the ground can use it to hold their local authorities to account. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that we have to go to the conclusions of this side event, really interesting, and both of the sessions, the first one at political level and this second one at the technical level. I have only few things to add, coming from the discussion, probably confirming something I said before, no, in the introductory remarks. As you can see, the dichotomy between a perceptive or perception-based measurement approach and a deepening objective data approach still remains. And I spent 7 years of my life when I was engaged for the first time in deepening the perception index approach. And what I felt at time was the need to reconduct the exercise of measure corruption in the line of the rule of law. The rule of law needs to know the phenomenon of corruption, but is as it is historically and factually, and also through objective demonstration. If you better know corruption, you better prevent, and you better fight against it. If you give your attention only to the perception approach, you can have paradoxical effect. I have tried to scientifically demonstrate that in some countries where there are some characteristics in the fight and prevention of corruption, you can have, through the perception approach, paradoxical effect. The more you fight, the more you make it perceivable. So you can have the paradoxical effect that fighting corruption, you go down in the ranking. Don't fighting corruption, you go up in the ranking. I think that all of us are in line with the need to go in depth on this. It is not only a reputation issue, but it's also a trust issue among citizens and institutions, because if we represent a country as most corrupt in respect of the reality, probably we have the possibility to have influence on the trust of citizens on an institution. So maintaining a relevance to the subjective indexes and the perception indexes as a noble, have a noble aim and also role in our activities, probably it's time to go over and considering that when we speak about measurement of corruption, we are not only trying to defend the reputation of one country or another country, but we are trying to defend and nurture the rule of law. And in conclusion, I say that a famous Italian artist said a lot of time ago that when he was old, he was still learning. And I can repeat this motto because also at the end of this panel, I can say that I'm still learning about measurement of corruption. Thank you all, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you.